Hello and welcome to this new philosophy channel. This is legitimately my first video and I'm putting some moxie behind it. I'm hoping to do various series, starting with one about the philosophy of culture, so expect that German Romanticism video you've all been hoping for. All 5 of you. I'd also like to say that I wouldn't be doing any of this if not for my admiration of Philosophytube and Gregory Sadler's YouTube channels, and they should have flown by just now. Now this video in particular is kind of a response to Philosophytube's Is Rick and Morty Existentialist video, the link to which should be flying by on screen right now, so grab it, get it! Ah, it's gone. Anyway, in that video, Mr. Philosophytube looked at Rick and Morty from an absurdist point of view, specifically comparing Rick to the absurdist man as defined by Camus in his essay The Myth of Sisyphus. Though, I think that interpretation is missing something. Rick and Morty, for the uninitiated, is a cartoon about a young kid named Morty, who's dragged away on crazy adventures by his granddad Rick, who just so happens to be the smartest person in the universe. Now the real wrinkle in the story is that Rick isn't your typical Doc Brown. He's a suicidal drunkard who routinely proves that he doesn't really value anything. At one point, he abandons the universe and kills a parallel universe version of himself and takes his place. He hates rules, even when he himself is the one making those rules. As a result, he kills himself a lot in the new season. He made Hitler Lincoln, damn it! Hell, in the aforementioned universe he abandoned, he also abandoned his own daughter and his granddaughter, and he even makes light of it, saying that he would do it again. But where does that put us in the existentialist boat? Well, in the Philosophytube video, this is linked with Camus, and I have some issues with that. For one, I don't think Philosophytube is claiming that Camus was existentialist. It's just that his ideas and how he describes the world as devoid of meaning, people put that in the existentialist boat. To the degree that in his own lifetime, Camus was fighting that title. I do think that Rick fits the absurdist category to a point though. Camus does describe a world devoid of meaning and a rift between that world and the man who functions on meaning. Rick doesn't believe that anything in the world matters. Even if he thinks things matter, the world will always prove him wrong. This is different from existentialism. In the broadest sense, existentialism is just the idea that we don't have an essence before we exist. It's a far-reaching philosophy dating as far back as Aquinas, who debated the existence and essence priority with Duns Scotus. Existentialism, as we understand it now, however, has been fundamentally linked with Jean-Paul Sartre, which is great for us because not only was he working in the same time as Camus, they both engage with each other's works. Sartre even published reviews of Camus' work. Now, in his lectures, Existentialism and Humanism, Sartre uses the example of a letter opener to describe the keystone idea of existentialism. He says that a letter opener is designed to open letters before it's made. Thus, its essence precedes its existence. And its existence is driven by its essence. He was an atheist, and he didn't believe men were designed. And as such, we don't have an essence before we exist. And to Sartre, that meant that our essence follows from us existing. Anyway, for Sartre, the world looks very different. He thinks that things like morality and value aren't a part of the world, but that we humans have the ability to construct these things by acting. It's where a real tension lies between Camus and Sartre, and I'll get to that in a minute, but first, I want to get back to Rick and Morty, and the reason I made this video. It was kind of a really perfect storm of luck. I was rereading The Myth of Sisyphus and loving Philosophytube, and at the same time, I stumbled upon an interview of Dan Harmon, the creator of the show.
That's the most terrifying thing about it. It doesn't give a fuck about you. Rick is the seam between God and man,
So, what do you think?
Get out. Jerry wants to be a good father. He wants to be macho, he wants to be rich, he wants to be a provider, and keeps being told by the universe Rick represents that that's a stupid goal that will always fail, because trying it means you've already failed.
Some people just can't handle the truth, especially dummies like me.
Does he have it better off? I mean, I think so. Like, at the end of the Unity episode, one character who can do anything he wants and whose ex-girlfriend is a billion redheads goes into the garage and tries to kill himself and only fails because he's so drunk he can't pull it off. And the other character is very happy to have his weed whacker back and is trimming his driveway and removing the weeds.
What about the reality we left behind?
What about the reality where Hitler cured cancer, Morty? The answer is don't think about it.
There, he defines the characters by their outlooks on life and the perspectives they have. Rick looks at the world from a God's eye view. Everything to him looks so small and unimportant. Jerry, on the other hand, is looking at things from a human perspective, and from that viewfinder, things do matter. Jerry isn't looking at the concept of a wife and how the idea of a wife matters. He's looking at his wife, and he loves his wife. She matters to him in this illusion of perspective. Jerry is looking at things through a sort of two-way funhouse mirror. This isn't how Sartre sees things, though. Sartre would say that Jerry's right, that he has, through his actions, made those things matter to Jerry. Sartre thinks that there is nothing essential in humans before we exist. And by existing, we make ourselves what we are. He thinks that because we exist and we are conscious, and no matter where we are and what we are doing, we are making choices and making ourselves through those choices. He says that people are condemned to these choices, condemned to be free. And ultimately, we are responsible for what we essentially become. Camus thinks differently. He even attacks Sartre's idea of freedom, calling it paradoxical. In the section Absurd Freedom in the Myth of Sisyphus, he says that there is no freedom. We can choose, for instance, to make dinner for our children, but we might die before we even do that. The only thing we know will happen is that we'll die at some point, and no matter how we act, we aren't really free. It's fundamentally the same idea as determinism, that everything you do is going to happen and you don't really have control over it. This is the tension I mentioned earlier. Camus refuted Sartre. He said that the existentialist philosophy first understood that the world is meaningless, and then chose to ignore it. He calls this analysis of existentialism philosophical suicide. Oof. So to me it seems like Rick and Morty is an absurdist universe, and Rick is right, but he's not better off for it. I think the show at heart envies Jerry's worldview, the existentialist worldview. Now where this really falls away from Camus is where Rick isn't really what Camus idealized as the absurd man to be. Rick isn't smiling except when he's drunk. He's depressed and he hates himself. Camus envisioned the absurd person who looked at the world this way to have three real options: to commit suicide, to live in denial, or acceptance. Rick seems to be perpetually in the suicidal mindset. I think the Philosophytube channel really makes a mistake in thinking that Rick rebels in the way Camus wants. Camus imagined Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a mountain only to see it tumble back down for him to push it back up again. He's trapped doing this task constantly, forever, and it has no meaning, and he knows this. He is a conscious creature, and he wants there to be meaning, and it's torture that there isn't. The divorce between the meaning Sisyphus sees and the meaningless nature of the world he exists in, that divorce is torturous. Camus imagines Sisyphus rebelling against that torture. He imagined him smiling, remaining conscious of the meaningless nature of his task, but doing it anyway and smiling while he does it. Now sure, Rick rebels a lot. He rebels constantly, but never against the thing that's crushing him. I'm not even sure Rick buys that as a viable option. Now I didn't really know how to end this video, so I'll just end it there before this gets far too dense. I do have a lot more to say about Rick and Morty and existentialism, specifically with how Camus and Sartre differ on their ideas on what a good action is and how people should behave. But I don't know, maybe I'll save that for a part 2. Please tell me what you think in the comments below, and let me know if you would like to go into anything in more detail, or if you think I should make videos a little less dense. I really want everyone's opinion since I am making a go of this internet video thing. Oh, and before I forget, please like and subscribe if you like this and want to see more of it.